She stayed silent while he rose to fame now. The millionaire is on his knees for her love asterisk. The fluorescent lights hummed softly in the intensive care unit as Dr. Alina Rodriguez finished her rounds at midnight. Most of the hospital had settled into its quiet rhythm. But she found herself drawn once again to room 314. Behind the glass door lay Marcus Thompson, a man who had been trapped in silence for 18 months. Alina paused at his bedside, studying his peaceful face. Even in unconsciousness, there was something striking about him. His dark hair had grown longer during his stay, and despite the machines surrounding him, he maintained an air of quiet strength. She had read his file countless times. 32 years old, tech entrepreneur, no immediate family, and the victim of a devastating car accident that had stolen his voice from the world. "Hello again," she whispered, settling into the chair beside his bed. This had become her ritual during the late shifts, when the hospital grew still. Something about Marcus drew her in, perhaps the loneliness she sensed even in his unconscious state. His assistant visited twice a week, leaving fresh flowers and business updates that would never be heard. Alina reached for his hand, checking his pulse as she spoke. "You know, I've been thinking about what you might have been like before all this. Your assistant mentioned you built that amazing app that helps people find lost pets. That tells me you have a kind heart." The monitors beeped steadily, the only response she ever received. But Alina had grown comfortable with the one-sided conversations. In the safety of room 314, she could share thoughts she never spoke aloud to anyone else. "I became a surgeon because I wanted to save people," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "But sometimes I wonder if I'm just hiding behind my work. It's easier to care for patients than to let someone care for me." She studied his face, imagining what his eyes might look like when they opened. Would they be kind? Understanding? She had spent so many hours here that she had memorized every detail of his features. "The funny thing is, talking to you has become the most honest part of my day. Isn't that strange? I tell you things I've never told anyone." Alina smiled softly, brushing an imaginary speck from his blanket. "Maybe it's because you can't judge me or leave when things get complicated." The night stretched on as Alina shared stories from her childhood in Mexico, her struggles in medical school, and her dreams of maybe having a family someday. She told him about the little cafe near her apartment where she bought coffee every morning, and how the owner always asked about her mysterious night shift patient. Dr. Rodriguez, a young nurse, appeared in the doorway. "There's an emergency in trauma too." Lena squeezed Marcus's hand gently before standing. "I have to go, but I'll be back tomorrow night. Sweet dreams, Marcus."
Yes.
As she hurried toward the trauma bay, Lena didn't notice the slight flutter of Marcus's eyelids or the way his fingers seemed to curl just slightly, as if trying to hold on to the warmth of her touch. Deep in his unconscious mind, a voice was calling him back to the surface. A voice filled with kindness and genuine care that made him want to fight his way back to consciousness. The emergency kept Alina busy until dawn, but her thoughts kept drifting back to room 314, to the man who had become her most trusted confidant, without ever saying a word. 3 weeks had passed since Alina first began her nightly visits to Marcus, and what started as simple bedside manner had evolved into something much deeper. She found herself hurrying through her other duties, eager to return to the quiet sanctuary of room 314. Tonight, she brought something different. A small Bluetooth speaker sat on the windowsill, playing soft jazz music at barely audible volume. "I thought you might like some music," she said, settling into her usual chair. "I read somewhere that coma patients can sometimes hear sounds even if they can't respond." Alina had done extensive research on Marcus's condition, reading every study about consciousness and recovery. Part of her medical training, she told herself, though deep down she knew it was more personal than professional. "Your assistant came by today. Rebecca, right? She seems nice, though she looked worried. She mentioned something about board meetings and company decisions that need your input." Alina picked up his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. "She also said you were working on something revolutionary before the accident. A new kind of virtual reality that could help people overcome trauma." The irony wasn't lost on her. Here was a man who helped others heal from trauma, now trapped in his own. I had a difficult surgery today, Elena continued, her voice growing softer. A little girl, maybe 7 years old. Car accident, just like you. For a moment, I was terrified I might lose her. She paused, feeling tears threaten. But when she opened her eyes and smiled at me, I thought about how her parents must have felt. That overwhelming relief and gratitude. She squeezed his hand tighter. I wonder if anyone will feel that way when you wake up. I mean, I know I will, but... She trailed off, realizing what she had almost confessed. The weeks of one-sided conversation had created an intimacy Elena had never experienced. She felt closer to this unconscious man than to anyone in her waking life. In the safety of his silence, she had shared her deepest fears, her childhood dreams, even her embarrassing first kiss in high school. "Marcus," she whispered, leaning closer to his ear. "I need to tell you something, and I hope wherever you are. You can't actually hear this because it's completely unprofessional and probably crazy." Her heart raced as she gathered courage for words she had never spoken aloud. "I think I'm falling in love with you. Not just the idea of you, but the person I've come to know through these conversations. The way your face relaxes when I read poetry, how your breathing seems to deepen when I play that Miles Davis album, even unconscious. You're the best listener I've ever known." Elena felt foolish and liberated all at once. I know how insane that sounds. I'm in love with a man who's never spoken to me, never looked at me, never even knows I exist beyond being his night nurse. She stood up, walking to the window where city lights twinkled below. But I can't help feeling like there's something here, some connection that goes beyond the medical. When I hold your hand, sometimes I swear I feel you squeeze back. Just... Slightly returning to his bedside, Elena leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead. "I promise I'll be here when you wake up, even if you don't want me to be. Even if you think I'm just the crazy nurse who talked your ear off while you were unconscious." What Elena didn't see was the single tear that escaped from Marcus's closed eye, the way his heart monitor showed a subtle but distinct acceleration whenever she spoke of love. It was 2:17 a.m. when Elena entered room 314, later than usual due to a complicated emergency surgery. She moved quietly, not wanting to disturb the peaceful atmosphere she had come to associate with her nightly visits to Marcus. "Sorry I'm late," she whispered, settling into her chair with a tired sigh. "It was a long night, but we saved him." Construction worker who fell from scaffolding. She reached for Marcus's hand as she always did, finding comfort in the familiar routine. "I've been thinking about what I said last night," Elena continued, her voice barely audible above the soft hum of machines. "About falling in love with you. I know it sounds crazy, but these past months, you've become my anchor, the one constant in my chaotic world." She traced gentle patterns on the back of his hand with her thumb. "Imagine conversations we might have when you wake up. I picture your voice, wonder what you'd think of my stories. Sometimes I dream that you're awake, and we're talking for hours about everything and nothing." Elena leaned forward, resting her head near his shoulder. The exhaustion from her long shift was catching up with her. "I brought you something today," she murmured, pulling a small origami crane from her pocket. "I learned to make these when I was little. My grandmother said they bring hope and healing." She placed the delicate paper crane on his bedside table next to the fresh flowers Rebecca had brought. "Make a wish with me, Marcus. Wish to come back to us. Come back to me." As she spoke these words, something extraordinary happened. Marcus's eyes began to flutter, so subtly at first that Elena missed it entirely. But then, slowly, deliberately, they opened. Elena was looking down at their joined hands when she heard it. A sound so soft she almost thought she had imagined it. "Elena." Her head snapped up, and there he was, looking directly at her with the most beautiful brown eyes she'd ever seen. For a moment, neither of them moved, both frozen in the impossibility of the moment. "Marcus," she whispered, afraid that speaking too loudly might break the spell. He tried to sit up, his body weak from months of inactivity, but his eyes never left her face. "Even more beautiful than I imagined," he said, his voice hoarse but unmistakably real. Elena's hands trembled as she reached for the call button. But Marcus caught her wrist gently. "Wait," he said, "before the doctors and nurses and chaos. Need to tell you something?" Tears streamed down Elena's face, as she stared at this miracle before her. "You're awake. You're really awake." "I heard everything," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger. "Every story, every confession, every time you held my hand and told me about your day. I've been trying to come back to you for weeks."
Us.
"Impossible," Alina whispered, though her heart was soaring. Marcus smiled, the expression transforming his entire face. "I heard you the very first night you sat with me. Your voice became my lifeline in the darkness. I fell in love with your kindness, your strength, the way you cared for a stranger like he mattered." Alina sobbed openly now, overwhelmed by emotions she had kept buried for months. "I thought I was losing my mind, talking to someone who couldn't hear me." "I heard every word," Marcus said, reaching up to touch her face with trembling fingers. "And I love you too, Alina. I've been trying to wake up to tell you that for so long." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, filled with months of unspoken words and impossible longing. When they finally broke apart, Alina pressed the call button, knowing their private moment was about to end. But as the room filled with medical staff and excited voices, Marcus never let go of her hand. And Alina knew that this was just the beginning of their real story together. 2 weeks had passed since Marcus's miraculous awakening, and the hospital had become a whirlwind of activity. News of his recovery spread quickly through medical circles, and soon reporters were calling it the miracle of Metropolitan General. But for Alina and Marcus, the focus remained on the quiet moments they could steal together. Between his physical therapy sessions and her demanding schedule, Marcus was making remarkable progress. The doctors were amazed at how quickly he was regaining strength and mobility. Alina suspected it had something to do with his motivation. Every morning when she started her shift, she would find him waiting for her with a smile that made her heart skip. "The physical therapist says I might be able to walk to the cafeteria by next week," Marcus said as Alina checked his vitals during her lunch break. They had developed a comfortable routine of stolen moments throughout the day. "That's wonderful," Alina replied, though she couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. "Rebecca mentioned something about you being discharged soon." Marcus reached for her hand. "I've been meaning to talk to you about that. There are some things we need to discuss about my life before the accident." Before Alina could respond, a sharp knock interrupted them. Rebecca appeared in the doorway, her usually composed demeanor showing signs of stress. "Marcus, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see you." Behind Rebecca stood a woman who took Alina's breath away. Tall, elegant, with platinum blonde hair and designer clothes that probably cost more than Alina's monthly salary. But it was the way she looked at Marcus that made Alina's stomach drop. "Hello, darling," the woman said, sweeping into the room as if she owned it. "I came as soon as I heard you were awake." Marcus's face went pale. "Victoria, what are you doing here?" Victoria ignored Alina completely, moving to Marcus's bedside with practiced grace. "I've been so worried about you. When I heard about your recovery, I knew I had to come immediately." She leaned down and kissed his cheek possessively. Alina felt invisible and completely out of place. "I should go," she said quietly, but Marcus caught her hand. "Alina, wait. Victoria, this is Dr. Alina Rodriguez. She's been taking care of me." Victoria finally acknowledged Alina with a cool smile. "How lovely. Thank you for keeping him alive for me." The dismissal in her voice was unmistakable. "Victoria and I were engaged before the accident," Marcus explained, his voice strained. "But we had broken up just before a silly misunderstanding," Victoria interrupted smoothly. "Nothing that can't be resolved now that you're better." She sat on the edge of his bed, claiming territory. "I've kept your penthouse exactly as you left it. Everything is waiting for your return." Lena felt her heart breaking as she watched the interaction. This woman belonged in Marcus's world in a way she never could. Victoria spoke of board meetings and social events, of mutual friends and shared investments. She painted a picture of a life filled with luxury and status that Alina couldn't begin to compete with. "The company has been struggling without you," Victoria continued. "The board wants you back as soon as possible. I've been handling some of your responsibilities, but everyone knows you're irreplaceable." Alina saw Marcus struggling with conflicting emotions. This was his real life, the world he came from and would return to. She was just the nurse who had talked to him in the dark. I need some time to process all this, Marcus said finally. Victoria smiled triumphantly. Of course, darling. I'll be at the Marriott downtown. Call me when you're ready to come home. She kissed him again, longer this time, marking her territory before sweeping out of the room. The silence that followed was deafening. Alina busied herself with unnecessary tasks, avoiding Marcus's gaze. Alina, please look at me, Marcus said softly. When she finally met his eyes, she saw confusion and pain that matched her own. She's beautiful, Alina said simply. And she's part of your real life? You're my real life now, Marcus insisted, but Alina could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Am I? Or am I just the fantasy you created while you were trapped in darkness? Elena's voice broke slightly. She knows you, Marcus. She knows your world, your friends, your business. I only know the stories you can't even remember telling. Marcus started to protest, but Alina was already moving toward the door. You need to figure out what you really want. But you should know that whatever you decide, I'll understand. As Alina left room 314, she heard Marcus calling her name, but she didn't turn back. Some decisions had to be made without the influence of the heart that had learned to love in the safety of silence. 3 days had passed since Victoria's unexpected arrival, and the tension in the hospital was palpable. Alina had requested a transfer to a different ward, unable to bear watching Marcus navigate his complicated past while she remained professionally obligated to care for him. Marcus, meanwhile, had been tormented by sleepless nights and difficult conversations. Victoria visited daily, bringing reminders of his former life and pressure to return to the world he had left behind. She spoke of business opportunities, social obligations, and a future mapped out with precision and wealth. But every moment away from Alina felt like losing pieces of himself he had only just discovered. On Thursday evening, as Alina finished her shift in the cardiac unit, she found Marcus waiting by the elevators. He was dressed in regular clothes for the first time since his awakening. And seeing him standing there, no longer confined to a hospital bed, took her breath away. You changed wards, he said simply. I thought it was best, Alina replied, avoiding his gaze. You're being discharged tomorrow. You need to focus on your recovery and your future. I need to focus on us, Marcus said firmly. Alina, please, just give me 5 minutes. Against her better judgment, Alina followed him to a quiet corner of the hospital's garden courtyard. The space was empty, except for a few benches surrounded by flowering bushes that bloomed even in the late evening air. I've been thinking about what you said, Marcus began, sitting beside her on a weathered bench. About Victoria being part of my real life and you being just a fantasy I created in the darkness. Elena's heart clenched, preparing for the inevitable. Goodbye. You're wrong, Marcus continued, turning to face her fully. Victoria represents everything I thought I wanted before I learned what it meant to truly live. Success, status, the perfect image of achievement. But lying in that hospital bed, listening to your voice, I discovered what really matters. Marcus, you don't understand how different our worlds are, Alina protested. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment and eat ramen noodles for dinner. You own buildings and companies. Victoria fits into your life seamlessly. Marcus reached for her hands, holding them gently between his own. Do you know what I remembered while I was unconscious? Not board meetings or profit margins or fancy parties. I remembered your voice telling me about the stray cat you feed behind your apartment building. I remembered you reading me that poem about finding beauty in ordinary moments. I remembered you saying that saving lives was more important than saving face. Tears began to fall down Elena's cheeks as Marcus continued. Victoria came to see me again today. She had everything planned out. The announcement of our renewed engagement, the timeline for my return to work, even the guest list for our wedding. She had my entire future arranged without once asking what I wanted. And what do you want? Alina whispered. Marcus smiled. The expression she had fallen in love with in the quiet darkness of room 314. I don't want morning coffee with someone who asks about my dreams, not my stock options. I want conversations that last until sunrise because we're too fascinated by each other to sleep. I want to build a life, not just a portfolio. He stood up, pulling Alina to her feet. I want you, Alina, Not because you saved my life in that hospital room, but because you showed me what life could be if I had the courage to choose love over convenience. But your company, your responsibilities will survive without me being consumed by them, Marcus finished. I'm selling my majority stake to Victoria and the board. I'll keep enough involvement to be comfortable, but I want to focus on projects that matter. Like that trauma therapy program I was developing. Like maybe helping a certain brilliant surgeon start a free clinic for underserved communities? Delina stared at him in amazement. You'd give up your fortune for me? I'm not giving up anything, Marcus said, cupping her face in his hands. Choosing everything that matters. You taught me that in the darkness, Alina. You taught me that love isn't about what you can offer someone materially, but what you can offer them spiritually, emotionally, completely. Their kiss was different this time, not tentative or desperate, but sure and promising. When they broke apart, Alina saw her future reflected in his eyes, and for the first time since Victoria's arrival, she believed it was possible. So what happens now? Lena asked. Marcus grinned, looking more alive than she had ever seen him. Now we go have terrible hospital coffee and start planning our real life together. The one where a brilliant surgeon and a reformed workaholic figure out how to save the world one day at a time. As they walked back toward the hospital hand in hand, Alina realized that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin in the darkest moments. When two hearts learn to recognize each other across the impossible distance between silence and sound, between dreaming and waking, between the life you planned and the one worth living. 6 months later, Rokas would propose to Elena in room 314, now converted to a consultation office for his trauma therapy program, and Elena would say yes in the same whisper she had used to call him back from the darkness, knowing that some love stories are worth waiting for, worth fighting for, and worth awakening for.